October 18th, 2023 meeting of the Council of City of Springdale. I would ask that you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty God, we must account to you for all our powers and privileges. Guide the people of this community in the election and their representatives, that by faithfully administer and wise laws, the rights may be protected and our city enabled to fulfill your purposes. Amen.
Amen. All right, Mrs. McNear, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Gantos? Mr. Hawkins?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Mr. Ramirez?
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weiscup?
Present.
Mr. Vanover?
Present. Mrs. Gantos called, and she had dental surgery today, so she is under the weather at the very best. All right, Council, first off this evening, we have the minutes from October 4th, 2023 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt. Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? All right. All those approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
The minutes are approved with 5 affirmative votes. All right. At this point, we'll move to committee and official reports. And Mr. Ewell, you're going to give us the civil service report this evening.
I am. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, Mr. Coleman unfortunately had a conflict. A special meeting came up that he had to attend, so I'll be providing the civil service report this evening. Civil service met on October 5th. All 3 members were present. Several discussions about some ongoing hiring processes. Of note, the Building Department Administrative Assistant, we have 1 person for full-time in the background phase. We have our firefighter EMT and firefighter paramedic hiring process for 1 full-time position. They actually conduct the physical ability test tomorrow morning at Fairfield's Training Tower. That's tomorrow at 9 a.m. They have 14 candidates that will be participating in that. We have a fleet mechanic in the background phase. We have a patrol officer in the background phase. We have a police clerk hiring process for 1 position for a retiring member who will be retiring December 1st. So we have interviews scheduled later on in October. And we have 1 full-time public works maintenance worker hiring process underway, and we provided 2 conditional job offers to 2 candidates. 1 declined, and 1 is in the background process. And we have a new tax account clerk hiring process that we just started yesterday.
Okay. That's any lights. All right, thank you, sir. Rules and laws, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay. Finance Committee, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay. Planning Commission, Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission met October 10th. Very light schedule. The only thing on the agenda was the Wawa for conditional use for their signage. They're looking to have 3 signs and modifications to the code for the 3 signs. So that's all we had, unless there's any questions.
Don't see any lights. Thank you, sir. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay. Board of Health, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Health met on the 12th of October. We had met previously during the big summer lag, so there wasn't a lot happening at the meeting. It's just some miscellaneous items. As always, we talk about updates on COVID. Numbers do continue to rise, but they're very mild in terms of the impact on individuals. There was a discussion about vaccines in terms of recommendations. Basically, the recommendation that came out of the discussion was that getting a flu shot is still widely recommended. Getting a COVID shot is recommended. There's also, we found last year, RVS infections had gone up right around the time that we were seeing less COVID infections, and RVS is also There's a vaccine that goes with that. So there's lots of choices for people to make. As always, I think the advice is, depending on your personal health situation, check with your individual doctor. If you've got what they call comorbidities, you're older, you've got other issues, then a vaccine is probably for you. Would be a short version of that longer conversation. Commissioner Clayton talked about increasing grants that we continue to receive for the Board of Health. Workforce development grants continue to be a great boon for the city, and a lot of the thanks for that go to Commissioner Clayton. He's a great grant writer, and we depend on that quite a bit. As far as the food report, Hibachi Express on the Pike is open. Dave & Buster's and Dunkin' Donuts are having a kitchen remodel that is pending, still in progress. And in general, this is kind of just procedural stuff. Each year, the Board of Health has to update the annual fee schedule for food vendors, pools, and hotel vendors. And so that was the first of 3 readings of those fee schedule updates. And our next meeting will be on November the 9th, unless there's any questions. That's all I have.
Didn't see any lights. Thank you, sir. Capital improvements, that's Ms. Gantos. We'll suspend that one, pick up on later. OKI, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. OKI Board met on the 12th of October. There are 3 items that I think are worth sharing. From that, the first, OKI announced a program, a new grant program that opens November 1st. It'll be on the OKI website. There'll be a call for projects. It's a carbon reduction program. There was a pilot version of this previously. This is money that could be used for things like electrical, like car outlet, like outlet things, build-outs like that. So they're calling for projects there. That'll start next month. The second thing we're sharing is the ICC met, and that's where the board formally approved the block grants that we talked about at the last meeting. There were $40 million of grants that were approved in the board meeting on the 12th. One of those was Springdale's Kemper and Northland project. That represents $4 million of the $40 million. So we got a big chunk out of that for that project. And we talked about that at the last meeting, but this was the meeting where it was actually approved. And that went through unanimously. It was nice to see Springdale was called out in one of the slides as our project as they reviewed the major projects that were approved, and it was nice seeing that being shared with a lot of other communities. The third thing we're sharing is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050 survey is coming at the end of the month. In the past, a few months ago, OKI did a survey to do a different regional plan that was based on trucks and transit. This is the one that's geared towards transportation planning, roads and that sort of thing. It sets the priorities for the funding. So like the $4 million Springdale just got, if the projects that we have don't meet the criteria for the long-term plans, it's harder for us to get approved. So individual communities are asked to publicize the survey, and residents get to fill out the survey, and you say what's important to you. This is a survey where people can say, I'm really into bike trails, or these are the roads I use, or this is what's important to me. That stuff does get used by the board to determine where the money goes. So the first call for those surveys will be coming out later this month. So look for those. In the past, Springdale's been well represented in terms of surveys. We've spoken up and been heard, and we see that as we get money back. So I'd encourage people when the survey comes out, typically the city will send out a Facebook notice that a survey is available. If you see that link, take a few minutes and fill it out. It is important and it does get used. That's all I have for today, unless there's any questions.
Don't see any lights. Thank you, sir. Mayor's report. Mayor Webster.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a whole lot to talk about tonight. I would like to give you an update on SOS, which we had our monthly meeting this afternoon. Pleased to report that 26 of the 42 vendor spaces have been committed. So we got 16 left. So if you want to display your wares on December the 5th, I think that's right. December 2nd. Okay. You better recall Elizabeth down to Community Center. But we got 16 left, and they're going fast. We also decided today we're going to create a GoFundMe account. Some people just don't want to write a check, don't want to give cash. So we're going to make it easy for people to donate to SOS. And we also are now accepting donor family calls. So 346-5725. Talk to this young lady down here, Debbie Boggs, and we'll get you all signed up. But we are starting to take those those volunteers. And so I guess that's about all I've got to say, except, we, last year we helped 100 families and over 375 children with gifts and food and warm clothing and so forth during the holiday season. So it's a great cause. We started it back in I think '08, and 100% of every penny that's ever been collected through SOS has been put back in. Has been put into the Treasury and has been used to help not only this Christmas program, but we've also helped elderly people get their houses painted, trees trimmed. Last couple of years, we started a scholarship program, and we're gonna continue that. And so it's a great Springdale charity. And so I would urge all of you to please open up your hearts and your wallets and help us to make this another Merry Christmas for a lot of underprivileged children. Thank you.
Ms. McNear?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mayor, don't you also do the baskets at Thanksgiving out of the SOS funds as well?
I am sorry.
Don't the Thanksgiving baskets?
Oh, the food, yes. We'll have, I think, 16 food drop-off locations, and we're still looking for some of those, as a matter of fact.
But the funds that go to SOS also are used for Thanksgiving baskets that are handed out to people throughout the community. So it's not just the Christmas gifts and food.
We also give out boxes of food. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes, a ton of food gets collected. As a matter of fact, I think I took most of you downstairs and showed you a couple years ago. We had it lined up up and down the hallway there, and we've since moved that over to the basement of the fire department. But it's a real operation where we put these bins out, a lot of office space, factories, whatever, and the employees drop off food, and those will go out in another couple of weeks here. We'll collect those a week or so before the cutoff, and sort those foods out, and make sure that every family gets a balanced basket of food, if you will. And it's a real operation, and I'm very proud of how much food we've been able to accumulate. And Myers has been a real contributor. Sam's also with generous donations, and so yeah, if you have some food you'd like to drop off, Rec Center will have a basket or a bin down there, and so will the fire department, the police department, and several other businesses throughout town.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Clerk, Council Finance Director, Ms. McNear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the general fund update through September 30th, 2023. For receipts based on a net receipt budget of $24.123 million, we've received $17.948 million, which is 74% of the anticipated budget. And those funds are made up of 5 major general fund receipt sources, which is an accumulation of $17.278 million, which is 96% of that budget. And then for expenditures through September 30th, based on a net expenditure budget of $24.108 million, we have spent $15.884 million, which is 61% of the budget. And our general fund ending balance as of September 30th, 2023 is $8.691 million. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Administrator's report, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple things here. Charlie Wilson wanted me to report that we had on Shred Day over 5,800 pounds of shred material. Said that he heard a lot of feedback with regard to residents grateful that they had the opportunity to shred things, but also they liked the idea that we were checking IDs to make sure they were actual residents. Kids Spooky Boo Bash this Saturday, October 21st, 2 p.m., kids 10 and under. Halloween event, and there's 14 new games and activities at the community center, costume contests, and haunted hallway tours. Winter sports registration is about to end, so if you have basketball, cheerleading interest with children or grandchildren, please connect down at the community center. And then an SYB Family Dance fundraiser is Saturday, November 4th, 6 to 8 p.m. Tickets will be purchased, if interested, at the community center. Thank you.
Thank you. Law Director, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. McNear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did attend the SHRED event, and as I pulled up, I had my ID available. And of course, they laughed at me because they knew me when I pulled up. And I said, well, how's it going? Is anybody giving you a hard time about having to show their ID? And they said not at all, and they said that people appreciated the fact that the line wasn't as long, and that, because, people who are not residents were not showing up, and they really appreciated the fact that all they had to do was show their ID, and only residents were there, so they really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm hoping we can get an update either tonight, or if you're not ready, another meeting. A few meetings ago, we had a resident come in and ask about jake braking or engine braking on Crescentville, and I believe administration said you were going to go back and do some research before we decided if it was something council needed to take up. I was just curious if there was an update on that, and if you're not ready for it tonight, I'm happy to get the update next time.
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have had some conversation with the resident who came in. It's still, we're still looking into it. Public Works is looking into a couple things as well, in conjunction with Westchester along that stretch. So it's in progress.
Okay, so we don't necessarily have a law in the books. It's something we'd have to add, we think.
Currently, there's nothing that exists in our books. No, the police department researched that. There's nothing that exists. So we're looking into, we do have some sample language to kind of put something together, but I would expect that to be forthcoming in the next couple meetings.
Thank you.
All right, Law Director's report. Mr. Braun?
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Okay, Engineers report. Mr. Riggs?
Thank you. So on the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project, we're moving along in the right-of-way acquisition process. We had signed appraisals returned back to our right-of-way consultant. Offers have went out, and I know they've been already negotiating some of the purchases of the property. We're going to have a meeting with the right-of-way consultant on October 27th to discuss the progress. Ideally, or well, the right-of-way acquisition phase has to be complete by January 19th, I believe. And right now, we're on track to do that. As many of you may recall, last meeting, we mentioned that the Northland Boulevard project was awarded $2 million in SORTA funds. So the contract signing will take place sometime early next year. And we also submitted an OPWC grant application for a little over $1 million on September 26th. We'll probably hear about the award sometime in January next year. Then the State Route 4 and 747 urban paving projects, both of those projects are substantially complete, so they can come off our list next month. The Springdale Community Center HVAC replacement project, we had a second pre-con meeting since so much time has taken since the first one. We had it on September 19th, and work began on the installation of the small air handlers and condenser units during the first week of October. The Crescentville Road 747, State Route 4 improvement project. All the storm lining work is complete. The catch basin replacements are ongoing, and the spot curb replacement work is expected to begin later this month. And the Tri-County Parkway sidewalk extension projects, 80% plans were submitted to Public Works on October 5th, and we just got review comments back today, and we're going to have a review meeting next week. That's all I had.
Mr. Riggs, there were crews working on Chesterdale Road, basically from the apartment complex south to in front of the ice cream factory, and there was a long pipe, looks like about 4-6 inches in diameter. Do we know, I've had a couple calls, what that is?
I'm not sure. I can look into it. I'll talk to Public Works to see if they know what encroachment permits out there. It sounds like it may be water or gas. Was the pipe yellow?
No, the pipe wasn't, and they had, the one fitting or connection there in front of the ice cream factory, you know, looked like something we'd see out of, water or submarine, the multi-bolts around it, so, and flange. And actually, there was a crane there lifting part of it today, so, but this has been going for probably, 3 or 4 weeks anyway. So I'm just curious. Like I said, I've got a couple calls and.
Yeah, I'll find out for you. It sounds like it's definitely a utility project, maybe water, potentially sewer with a force main. I think there's a pump station there, so I'll look into it.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you. All right, Rental Program Committee, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Communications, Ms. McNear, are there any communications this evening?
Nothing this evening, Mr. President, thank you.
All right, well, at this point, we'll go to the floor for communications from the audience. And I would ask that those not speaking, listen intently, and keep their comments to themselves. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is, excuse me, City Administrators as well. My name is Sean Davidson. I am the manager of the Forest Park branch of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library, located at 655 Waycross Road in Forest Park, Ohio. I'd like to briefly provide an overview of our recent activities over the past year and also provide some updates on the Northland Boulevard project. While in name it's the Forest Park Branch Library, we, along with neighboring library branches, serve many residents here in Springdale. I recognize a few of you as library customers and a couple of folks in the audience as well as customers. And not only do we serve residents in the branch, but through outreach to schools, early childhood education centers, and retirement centers here in Springdale. Year to date, the branch has had over 49,000 visitors, a 14% increase over last year. We've checked out over 47,000 items, provided access to 10,000 computer sessions and 16,000 Wi-Fi connections. We've also hosted over 180 programs and events for all ages. Specifically, I'd like to highlight our extremely popular small business and nonprofit series that has connected local entrepreneurs to experts in business planning and fundraising. Many local business owners use the library as a hub to print material, host meetings, and simply have a place to work outside of their home. We've also made health education a priority, partnering with Closing the Health Gap to offer several healthcare seminars, and every Thursday afternoon, Mercy Health holds a free baby cafe at the library to provide critical guidance and education for new and expecting mothers. We have also acted as a host for distributing and installing free car seats, distributing bicycle helmets, and providing bicycle safety education to children on site. The library has also supported Princeton City Schools at various family literacy nights, and also delivering curated collection of books to the educators that work there. This has also been a standout year for bringing in unique learning opportunities from around the region. Just this year, we've hosted Great Parks of Hamilton County, the Cincinnati Ballet, Cincinnati Art Museum, Contemporary Arts Center, the Observatory, and the Newport Aquarium. So we're really striving to provide these type of unique experiences to residents without even having to leave your own neighborhood. Very quickly, I'd like to talk about the Next Generation Library Project. If any of you have driven over on Northland Boulevard near the Parkdale Post Office, you've certainly seen the steel structure take shape as the new library starts to form. And just from seeing that, I hope that it's clear that this investment will be a special asset to the entire region. This will be a 26,000 square foot facility, not only housing more resources, but larger community and private study spaces, a robust children's space, an outdoor courtyard, and a drive-through pickup window. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting regarding the public makerspace, And I can tell you that the tools that will be available in this facility will be on par with the makerspace in downtown Cincinnati. Just some of the tools that will be in that space, and I always say it's subject to change, a large-scale vinyl printer, a laser engraver, and new to any library location, a direct-to-garment printer for printing custom t-shirts, tote bags, and other fabric items. The project is currently on track to open summer of 2024, and we can't be more excited for the opening, and I also can't be any prouder to work for this area of the county. So thank you all for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be staying after the meeting as well. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, Sean, I think it's wonderful what the library investment has been over there in Forest Park, right near us. The makerspace stuff is especially exciting to the people I talk to. The vinyl printer and the material downtown is always booked. Like, you have to do weeks or months out. Having another option so close is wonderful. So we're super excited for it. And one of the things that I thought was really great about the way the library went about doing it was all those listening sessions they had. And you saw them make real changes to the design based on what people were saying. It wasn't just, these are shelves, it's how are people using the library, and they really listened to that, so I thought that was great. So thank you for what you do over there. It's always so welcoming over there, even though we still call it the Parkdale or library, even though you call it Forest Park. I think that still applies. Thank you.
Thanks.
Say more lights. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good luck. Still in communications from the audience.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Anticipated Mayor, and members of council, my name is Ed Knox. My wife Joan and I live at 881 York Haven Road in the excellent city of Springdale. I had the honor of being the Clerk of Council Finance Director for 12 years and a member of council for 4. I am proud of my service and proud of my city. However, some of the events that I have witnessed recently make me believe that those good days may be gone. It is unnerving to view some of the nonsense to which the mayor and council are subjected by some of those who speak before council. They ask complex questions and repeatedly state that they cannot grasp what they are being told. The truth is that in many cases there is no answer to their questions. This is particularly true in zoning appeal cases. Having served on that board, I can testify that definitive, decisive information is very, very hard to come by in many cases. It was, however, after another event that made my vision of what could happen to Springdale come into focus. The incident that I'm bringing before you occurred on Thursday, October 5th. Our doorbell rings when someone is placing something in our mailbox. Just before 1 in the afternoon, it rang. As you can see, being very slow of foot, I had some time before I retrieved it. The person who placed it in the mailbox was gone. Each one of you should now have a copy of what we received. It was a crude attempt to vilify a person who was running for council. The item had no stamp on it and no return address. Most people are aware that any item placed in a mailbox without a stamp and a return address is in violation of postal regulations. Given the nature of the piece and the lack of postage, I informed the U.S. Postal Service by email. It is now their case number 558-15665. The following day, I contacted Mrs. LaVon Webster, the subject of the piece. I thought it was fair that she should be informed of what had been said. She asked if my doorbell recorded a video of the person who delivered it. It did, but I'm exceptionally bad at using my cell phone. Most people my age seem to be. But because of that problem, it was the 13th before we had a clear and easily identifiable video. This piece of vile literature stated in bold print that Mrs. Webster refused to account for SOS money. Refused to account for SOS money. My question is, why should she? It is the duty of the health department and the SOS board to keep that information. It is they who are charged with that. Records that she does not have. If they want information, they should contact the health department. She neither works for the health department, nor is she a member of the SOS board. Her only association with those entities is when she and her daughter do the grunt work of buying the presents, wrapping them, and delivering them to the fire department, who, by the way, are the elves who make the deliveries. Note that they generously use their time and transportation and do so without any payment. It appears that there is a certain element within this city that does not want LaVon Webster on council. They spread lies and innuendos to achieve their goal. They know that Mrs. Webster has enough knowledge, gumption, and forthrightness to challenge ideas that would make changes to the detriment of the city of Springdale as we now know and enjoy it. Please do what you can to rectify this and make sure that it does not happen again. I thank you all for listening, and I thank you for your service.
Ms. Weisskopf?
Thank you. I have a question for administration, or maybe Joe, I'm not sure. I saw what was distributed. It's not true. I've donated to SOS before, and LaVon Webster doesn't know SOS, so I thought it was funny that she was supposed to account for money. But my question was, is anything being done about this now? I know from what I've always understood was that if you put something into a mailbox that doesn't have postage and it isn't mail, that is a crime. And I just didn't understand what's going on here. I don't understand what's going on here. Can someone please help?
I think the city's official position should be that we should not discuss an ongoing investigation. So I think it would not be appropriate to comment from the dais.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're still in communications from the audience.
Walk on, if I may.
Sure.
Do I have to sign this? Okay. Good evening. I normally wouldn't be here at City Council. The city does their business. I'm a resident here for 28 years with my husband and family. Wouldn't normally be here either, except for I've got a concern I'd like to raise and request a review by the council and administration for a review of the recent enforcement involving the parking ordinances. My husband would be here and some of our neighbors, but it's been impromptu, and I'll get to that point here shortly. So back on August 23rd, so as I mentioned, we've been a residence for 28 years. Never had an issue in this area. August 23rd of this year, we have a notice. So I call and ask the building department, what's the scoop? Why are we getting a parking violation notice? They indicate, okay, you've got parking on the yard. Peace, we had a car parked in the yard that day, we removed it. Think everything's settled. September 5th, we get a violation order. Talked with the council rep and the building department. This is when I called the building department. It's after the first two violations, or the notice and the violation, excuse me. They mentioned it, so I said, what's going on here? Who reported it? We asked our neighbors. Neighbors are not complaining. They indicated, and we've got that the police department reported those in both situations. I'm like, the police department, both of these, the notice and the violation were taken care of. There were a car parked in the yard, on the full yard, mind you, but it was taken out. We had no room in the driveway those evenings. And again, it was overnight, and then gone during the day when we have to go to work. So then escalated it, talked with our city district council rep, and actually some emails to city administration. I fully understand what you're trying to do with cleaning up the neighborhoods and stuff, but I just feel that this is an impractical, illogical, and irrational enforcement of what we're doing here. And case in point, I get a call from I'm calling my husband on my way home from work. He says, "Excuse me, there's somebody at the door." We thought it was our neighbor. Police officers there to give him a ticket. They've apparently, and we think it's from a Saturday morning for a building department person. Lord knows who's asking them to go out and look on our driveway on a Saturday morning, and indicates that apparently he's got to come to Mayor's Court because my Honda Pilot, it's not his, it's both registered to us, is parked in the driveway but has one tire off the driveway. It's on gravel, mind you. It's not, and then grass. It's a mix, but it's just right off the driveway. It's not fully in the yard like the other two. And yet now he's got to come to Mayor's Court. He refused. It's not his vehicle, for one. He's not be here. I'm not going to tell you where he is because we've got a felony potential or a warrant for his arrest because of a parking ordinance. There are more critical priorities in this city. They're speeding on our street, incessant. That's why we don't park in the street. There's a shooting at Northland Boulevard. I don't know if that crime has been solved or what's been done about it. The police have better things to do. We have heard from our neighbors and other city residents that this is an irrational application. Yes, it's the law, but it's an irrational application of that ordinance when we have bigger things to do in the city. Again, I've lived here 28 years, and I kind of agree with this gentleman. If we've got these priorities to harass people who are paying their taxes and don't commit crimes beyond parking off their driveway slightly, we've got a big problem here in the city. And I would request that the people take that into account. I have heard from other folks that this is citywide. The police officer told my husband that you have gotten several complaints. And I fully understand what you're trying to do, but you're approaching it totally the wrong way. And I'd request that you relook at that and stop. You're going to force people who like to live here, pay your taxes, to move out of the city. And I don't think that's what you want. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ma'am, can you state your name and address for the record?
Shelley Darnell, 329 Cameron Road.
And,
thank you.
And I'm not sure of the, appreciate you coming out. I don't know of the situation. I wasn't obviously a district rep, so I'm unaware of what the ordinance was specifically and what have you. I'll check in with the administration when we finish and see what's going on with it, but I can't speak to that. To be clear, though, is your concern, because I don't know what the ordinance is or all those circumstances, is the ordinance speaking to vehicles that are parked in yards or vehicles that are parked?
I don't know what it's speaking to, so maybe it needs some clarity. The ordinance 153.302, parentheses A, parentheses C2, parking. No motor vehicle shall be parked or stored on any unimproved area. Okay, what's the definition? We got one tire off a driveway. Both the owner of any such improperly parked or stored motor vehicle and the owner or occupant of the property on which the vehicle is parked shall be considered in violation of this section. To resolve this issue, you must remove vehicles from non-unapproved surfaces before blah, blah, blah. We did that in all cases. But frankly, my Pilot in the driveway with one tire off is not something that's going to go away. So if you're going to pull us to Mayor's Court and we're going to go and have a felony warrant for our arrest because I can't park one tire off the driveway, then there's a problem.
Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad you could make it to the meeting. I know we've spoken by the phone and through email as well. Can we clarify that there's actually a felony issue here? Because that doesn't sound correct. Can we clarify for the resident?
I take that, no, it is true, because, my son had to go for parking, and they said at the court, the mayor's court, we went there, and he said it was a felony, and the police officer said it's supposed to be a felony, if he doesn't show up at mayor's court.
Mr. Braun?
Ma'am, we'll certainly look into it. I can tell you that our mayor's court only hears misdemeanors, so I don't know if someone miscommunicated that, or maybe there's another matter going on, maybe in another court, but we'll certainly look into it and get back to you.
Okay, Stone communications from the audience. Second call.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
as someone who lives in and around that neighborhood, I drive through there 7 days a week, and I want to make sure that the resident is representing herself accurately, and some of the things she's saying is factually inaccurate. I drive by there 7 days a week. On a regular basis, there are vehicles parked in the yard, not off the driveway in the yard, physically in the yard. So that's why the police and other folks have gotten active and gotten involved. I not only witnessed it personally, but I've had several other people complain to me about it. So I just thought I should share.
All right. Communications from the audience, second call. Third and final call, we'll close communications from the audience. At this point, we'll move into our ordinances and resolutions. And first off this evening, we have ordinance number 40, 2023. It does include an emergency clause. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 40, 2023, an ordinance accepting a proposal under the State of Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with Southeastern Equipment Company Incorporated in the amount of $187,885 for the purchase of a wheel loader and declaring an emergency. Whereas the State of Ohio Department of Transportation has advertised and received bids for the purchase of a wheel loader, and whereas the city wishes to purchase a wheel loader for use by the Public Works Department, and whereas Southeastern Equipment Company Incorporated was the lowest and best bidder for the purchase of a new wheel loader and with a total bid of $187,885. Now therefore, be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that the city of Springdale accepts the state's specifications for a new wheel loader and agrees that the Southeastern Equipment Company Incorporated is the lowest and best bidder for the purchase of a new wheel loader for the city in the amount of $187,885. A copy of the quote provided is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the mayor and clerk of council finance director are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with Southeastern Equipment Company for the purchase of a new wheel loader. Section 3, that the clerk of council finance director is hereby authorized to pay a Southeastern Equipment Company the sum of $187,885 for the purchase of a new wheel loader. Section 4, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 5, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the emergency is the immediate need to enable the city to execute the agreement as soon as possible prior to the expiration of the state bid price.
All right, council, have heard the reading of ordinance number 40, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. As you will see on a little descriptive information we had there, this is the current one we have in operation is a 2007. It is still operational and it's working, but it's starting to head toward its last leg, and we're trying to get out in front of this. This is something that we use for a different variety of different things, but it can be used for loading rock salt and so forth. We have to have that. we have to be able to put our salt up in the dome and get it. It's not legal for us to leave it outside of the dome. It has to be covered and has to be stowed away. So I applaud Public Works' efforts to get out in front of this, and then we also, or I should mention too, that this, even if we get it ordered today, we're not going to be dealing with our first payment until 2024, and it's going to be some time before it's actually delivered. It could be several months. So I just thought I'd share.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. And the reason I agree it's good to get out ahead of it. The reason it's an emergency is because we're trying to maintain a bid price from the end of October. So that's why we're using this process for this one and the next one.
Yeah, good point. I'm remiss in not saying that is one of the factors. Just like when we, I think Mr. Hawkins reported at a previous meeting that with regard to the ladder truck, the prices get locked in, and then each month it starts to change, and this is a locked-in price for now, but it will change if we don't address it. So yes, that is why we've asked for an emergency. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And this isn't just competition with the fire department where they need a new truck too.
Okay, Mr. Ramirez?
Thank you, Mr. President. And as normal, the old device will be sent off for auction or to Gov Deals. Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, Ms. McNeary, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Ordinance 40, 2023 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And next up is ordinance number 41, 2023. It also includes an emergency clause. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 41, 2023, an ordinance authorizing the City of Springdale, Ohio to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement by and between Huntington Public Capital Corporation and the City of Springdale, Ohio, in principal amount of $190,000 to finance the purchase of a wheel loader for the City of Springdale and authorizing other documents in connection therewith and declaring an emergency. Whereas the City of Springdale, Ohio, the city desires to finance the purchase of a wheel loader for the purpose of providing public works services in the City of Springdale, the property. Whereas the financing and leasing of the property will be in the best interest of the city, and whereas Huntington Public Capital Corporation, a division of the Huntington National Bank, Huntington, has agreed to purchase or finance the property and to lease the property to the city. And whereas the city has agreed to lease the property from Huntington, and whereas the city hereby finds and determines that the execution of a lease purchase agreement in the form to be negotiated to the satisfaction of the mayor and clerk of council, finance director, the lease, and in the principal amount not to exceed the amount stated above, for the purpose of acquiring the property to be described in the lease, is appropriate and necessary to the functions and operation of the city. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that for the purpose of providing a wheel loader for the city and the services rendered thereby, this council hereby determines that it shall lease under the lease and property from Huntington. Section 2, that the city is authorized to lease the property through Huntington. Section 3, that for the purpose of providing the property and payment of costs of issuance related to the lease, the council hereby authorizes and directs the mayor and clerk of council, finance director, to negotiate, enter into, execute, and deliver in each case on behalf of the city, the lease, and any exhibits thereto in principal amount of $190,000 payable over a period of 5 years at an effective interest rate of 5 3/35% per annum. The remaining term of the lease shall be negotiated in a form approved by the mayor and the clerk of council, finance director in a manner not inconsistent with this ordinance, and the execution thereof by such officials or either of them shall be deemed conclusive evidence of such approval. This council hereby further authorizes and directs the mayor and the clerk of council, finance director of the city to execute on behalf of the city all other related contracts, agreements, and certificates necessary and incidental to the lease and any other exhibits thereto. Upon execution, the covenants and promises contained in the lease and ancillary documents made on behalf of the city shall be conclusively binding on the city and in full force and effect from and after such execution. Section 4, that the city's obligations under the lease shall be subject to annual appropriation or renewal by this council as will be set forth in the lease, excuse me, and the city's obligation under the lease shall not constitute a general obligation of the city or indebtedness under the constitutional laws of the state. Section 5, that this council hereby authorize and directs the mayor and the clerk of council finance director of the city or either of them to execute and deliver a non-arbitrage certificate and such other documents and certificates, and to do all of the acts and things required of it by the provisions of the lease, to the end that full and complete performance of all of the terms, covenants, and provisions of the lease shall be effected. Section 6, that this council hereby covenants that it will take such actions in such manner and to such extent, if any, as may be necessary to cause the interest component of the rental payments under the lease to be and remain excludable from gross income for the federal income tax purposes. This council will also submit the appropriate statements or filings to the Internal Revenue Service containing the information required by the Internal Revenue Code, including IRS Form 8038G. Section 7, that the obligations under the lease are hereby designated qualified tax-exempt obligations for the purposes set forth in Section 265 of the Internal Revenue Code. The city does not anticipate issuing more than $10 million of qualified tax-exempt obligations during the calendar year 2023. Section 8, the proceeds of this lease shall be credited to the proper fund or funds as provided in the lease, and those proceeds are appropriated and shall be used for the purpose for which the lease is authorized and are hereby appropriated for that purpose. Section 9, there is hereby appropriated from unappropriated funds currently on deposit in the general fund of the city, the sum of $0 to pay the cost of lease payments due or coming due under the lease for the initial term ending December 31st, 2023, and the sum of $5,350 to pay costs and expenses associated with the property and the lease. Section 10, this council hereby approves the issuance of the obligations for the financing of the property. Section 11, that it is found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and related to the adoption of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code and the rules of this council adopted in accordance therewith. Section 12, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the declaration of emergency is the immediate issuance of said lease obligation is required for the orderly and timely financing of the property. Reference to herein include obtaining a favorable rate of interest.
All right, council, I've heard the reading of ordinance 41, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Mr. Ramirez?
Thank you, Mr. President. This being a lease purchase at the end of the term of 5 years, we own the property without any further cost.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, we will own the property at the end of the lease. And I might mention too, since I have the mic just briefly, that this was the lowest rate out there that our tax commission was able to secure.
Thank you.
All right, doesn't say any more lights. Ms. McNear, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Ordinance number 41, 2023 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And next up is ordinance number 42, 2023. It does include an emergency clause. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 42, 2023, an ordinance declaring certain city property as surplus property and authorizing the sale, disposal, or transfer of said surplus property and declaring an emergency. Whereas council has determined that certain property of the city is no longer needed by the city for municipal purposes or useful as such, absolutely or temporarily. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, consistent with Article 8, Section C3 of the Charter of the City and as permitted by Ohio Revised Code 721.15, the items listed on the attached Exhibit A owned by the city are hereby declared to be surplus property no longer needed for municipal purposes or useful as such, absolutely or temporarily, and that such property may be sold by internet, auction, or otherwise, transferred, disposed of, or traded in by the city and may have the value credited against the purchase price of other personal property to be used by the city. Section 2, that the city administrator is hereby authorized to dispose of said property in the manner specified herein. Section 3, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall be effective immediately upon its passage. The reason for said declaration of emergency is the need to enable the city to dispose of the property at the earliest possible date to complete other transactions.
All right, council, I've heard the reading of ordinance 42, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Second.
Motion second, discussion? Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a question on the body worn cameras. Have we gone to a different style or model or something?
Mr. Yule?
Not working?
Thank you, Mr. President. Correct. The V-View model that the police department used over the years is discontinued, no longer available. V-View was actually purchased by Axon, so they have migrated over to the Axon platform.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. The emergency clause at the end of this, it mentions to complete other transactions. I think that's a new one for one of these surplus deals. Does that mean we're trading in some of these cars for new vehicles, or what does that mean?
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. You're correct. Some of these vehicles will be traded in. There's others that are going to be sold to a dealer. There is a production company that likes to purchase police vehicles to use in movies and whatnot. So some of these will go as marked. They'll remove Springdale logos and whatnot, but they'll go outfitted. So these will all be applied to the purchase of new.
Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, Ms. McNear, poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
All right,
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 42, 2023 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And next up is ordinance number 43, 2023. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 43, 2023, an ordinance amending ordinance number 51, 1999 to extend the exemption from taxation for certain parcels in the city pursuant to ordinance 5709.51 and declaring an emergency. Whereas the Ohio Revised Code ORC 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43, collectively, the TIF Act authorizes this council by ordinance to declare the improvements to parcels of real property located within the city to be public purpose and exempt from taxation, require the owner of each parcel to make service payments in lieu of taxes, establish a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those service payments, and specify the purposes for which money in that fund will be expended. And whereas ordinance number 51-1999 passed by this council on November 3rd, 1999, the TIF ordinance declared improvements to certain parcels of real property in the city as identified on Exhibit A to the TIF ordinance and shown on Exhibit A attached hereto the parcels to be public purpose exempted to the improvements to those parcels from real property taxes for a period of 30 years, require the owners of such parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, and otherwise establish a tax increment financing program for those parcels. And whereas pursuant to ordinance 5709.51, this council may amend the TIF ordinance to extend for up to 30 additional years the exemption from taxation of improvements to the parcels granted pursuant to the TIF ordinance if certain conditions are met. And whereas the city desires to extend the exemption from taxation of improvements to the parcels pursuant to ORC 5709.51 to enable the city to make public infrastructure improvements that will directly benefit the parcels. And whereas notices have been provided to the Board of Education of the Princeton City School District, the school district, and the Board of Education of the Great Oaks Institution of Technology and Career Development, Great Oaks, of the city's intent to pass this ordinance. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, that Section 1, the council finds and determines that service payments made by the owners of the parcels pursuant to the TIF ordinance exceeded $1,500,000 in calendar year 2022. Section 2, that the TIF ordinance is hereby amended to extend the exemption from taxation of improvements to each parcel for a period of 30 years from the end of the exemption for that parcel as determined by Section 4 of the TIF ordinance, the extension period. The limitation in Section 4 related to the termination of the exemption created by the TIF ordinance upon retirement of the increment debt is superseded by the extension effected by this ordinance. Section 3, pursuant to ORC 5709.51A3, the TIF ordinance is hereby amended to provide that for each year of the extension period for a parcel, the school district and Great Oaks shall receive compensation equal in value to the amount of the taxes that would be payable to the school district or Great Oaks respectively if the improvements to the parcel had not been exempted from taxation from the extension period. Section 4, exception as provided herein, all other provisions of the TIF ordinance shall remain in full force and effect. City officials are further authorized to provide such information and to execute, certify, or furnish such other documents as to do all other things as are necessary for and incidental to carry out the provisions of this ordinance. The mayor is hereby authorized to enter into one or more revenue sharing agreements with the school district or Great Oaks to implement the foregoing compensation agreements if the mayor deems such agreement or agreements necessary or advisable. Section 5, this council finds and determines that all formal actions of this council and any of its committees concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council or any of its committees, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that resulted in formal actions were in meetings open to the public. All compliance with the law, including ORC 121.22. Section 6, this ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants of the city of Springdale. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure for the further reason that it is necessary to be effective immediately to enable the city of Springdale to obtain funding for economic growth and development of real property located within the city of Springdale, wherefore this ordinance shall be effective immediately upon its passage.
All right, council, have heard the reading of ordinance 43, 2023. It does include an emergency clause. What is your pleasure? Motion second. Discussion, Mayor Webster.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Andy Kushner and Brian for bringing this thing to, excuse me, bringing this to our attention, because this is a seldom used ordinance, and we don't know why it was put on the books, but we're going to take advantage of it. And this is a 24-year-old TIF, and throughout the time of this TIF, there's been several years where the payments have been short, and thanks, I got one here. The payments have been short, but the developer has always been very diligent in making it, the service payments up. So this thing has not cost the city a penny during the 24 years. And this gives us a golden opportunity to collect for another 30 years, some TIF payments here. And it does not involve the school system, so the school will be made whole, which is good. And it will give us some much-needed resources to apply to that site. And also there's still some undeveloped properties over there. And this, we could use this money all the way out to Crescentville Road if we need to make some improvements on Crescentville. And so I think it's really a windfall for the city. And I would certainly hope council would see fit to support that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just one question on it. As Mayor Webster mentioned, the developer has been keeping up payments and performing well. Now, in Section 3, the school district's made whole, right? So they're going to get full payments. There's not negotiation. In the event the developer isn't able to keep up payments or the payments don't keep up, does this extension create any liabilities for the city, or are we still remain without liability if the TIF doesn't perform?
Yeah, Andy?
Does that make sense? I just want to make sure we're not adding a new
We're gonna turn the
obligation.
expert loose on you here.
Thank you.
I don't know about expert, but I do know the answer to this question. So the developer made payments in the first few years when bonds had to be issued for the construction of Victoria Drive and Northwest Boulevard, but there was no real property improvement yet, so no TIF funds were being generated. So the developer had to put in about, I think, $3 million in the first few years of this TIF before revenue is generated. We have been making payments back to that developer as the agreement required in the last at least 5 years. So the balance that is left now to be paid back to that developer is $1.6 million. And I think last year it was about $450,000 that was paid to the developer because we have excess TIF revenue that doesn't have to go towards payment of some other bond pledges for the construction of Victoria Drive and Northwest Boulevard, as well as the city had also pledged a little bit towards the construction of the garage next to Victoria Tower. It's a Port Authority project. So the developer will be paid off at this current rate within the next 3 years before the current TIF expires in 2029. So there's absolutely no liability for the city in that TIF extension to make any further payments to that developer. And the developer's not going to have to pay anything more into this TIF between now and when it expires because it's generating more than enough revenue to pay off the bonds that are out there.
But the school district payments are going to increase when we extend it. So I guess the question is, I understand the developers, that part's covered and that payback, but we're not introducing a new liability to the school districts. If the revenues don't come in, that still, if the TIF doesn't perform, they just don't get those payments either.
Yeah, if say, for example, if some of the properties get devalued over the next few years,
right,
when this extension kicks in, whatever the equivalent of the real estate tax payments would be, the school districts are going to get their equivalent share of what their normal millage would be. So if the tax revenue or the service payments goes down in the year 2030, 2031, then whatever percentage the school districts would normally get, that's what they're going to continue to get for the next 30 years.
So we're not introducing ourselves as a payer into that.
No.
I think it's great that we're being able to use this extension to improve developments there. I just want to make sure we weren't introducing a liability. Thank you.
Mayor Webster?
Yeah, Andy, could you briefly define the area where we can spend this money?
It is not 100%. There's not very firm, set in stone boundaries. There has to be some nexus to the area of the TIF, and the parcels of the TIF include the Victoria Tower, the Victoria Garage, Papadou Restaurant, the restaurant that's vacant now, formerly known as Smoke, the Home 2 Suites, and a couple of vacant parcels right around Victoria Tower. So additionally, we can certainly use it on repaving and reconstructing Victoria Drive, Northwest Boulevard, because that's what part of this TIF was originally targeted for. But then if you think about anybody coming to use those restaurants, anybody coming to work at Victoria Tower, they go along Crescentville Road, so we can use those dollars to repave that. We can use those dollars for stormwater improvements in the area, which are Springdale-owned infrastructure for the most part, as well as sidewalk expansions or new sidewalk construction in the future, connecting those properties further.
What about help us with the payment on the tower we just purchased?
We'll have to dig into that more with our public finance attorney to see if that could be an eligible use of those dollars. I do not know the answer tonight.
I don't see any more lights. Ms. McNeary, poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 43, 2023 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And that concludes our ordinances and resolutions. We're into new business. Is there any new business to bring before council this evening? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know there have been discussions going on for some time with the changes coming up for council meetings with Ms. McNair's position leaving. I just want to make sure, just check in. Is there anything that we need to do as a council to change our rules for like readings starting in December, things that we need to do that we might have to take care of in next month's meeting before those changes happen? What's that going to look like? Because I don't think we've talked about that as a group.
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. Couple things. Yes, all that is under construction at this time. There's going to be several meetings over the next couple weeks to kind of iron out how that process should look and how we want that to flow. In advance of that, in conjunction with that, there'll be probably a couple meetings worth of several code changes as a result of the charter amendment that was made to kind of delineate responsibilities and whatnot. But everything you're speaking to is kind of under development right now, and we're looking at different municipalities to see how they conduct business and whatnot, provide a couple options, present that to President Vanover to see how we would move forward.
Great. Thank you. I knew it was in the works. It was getting close, and if we're going to make code changes, it would have to be pretty soon. I know there's still some straggler code in there about like that some duties for the clerk would still do. They need to be cleaned up. Like I think right now a resident could send a letter in, a self-addressed stamped letter, and then the clerk has to hold it and send out meeting announcements that way. Things like that. I just want to make sure we clean up too. So thank you.
Still in new business? All right, meetings and announcements. Wait a minute. Old business, it's at the bottom. Okay, old business. Mr. Jacobs?
That's for a meeting.
Okay. All right. All right, meetings announcements. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Health will meet on November the 9th at 7 p.m. adjacent to these chambers.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Zoning Appeals is planning to have a meeting in these chambers on October 24th, so next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Ms. Weisskopf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission will meet in these chambers on Tuesday, November 14th at 7 p.m.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. No meeting, but just an announcement. Our very own Don Darby was announced to be inducted into the Princeton High School Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Mr. Darby.
Okay. All right. At this point, we'll go back to the floor for communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience to address council? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. Mr. Hawkins, we'll go to you for an update on legislation still in development.
We had before us ordinance number 40, 2023, an ordinance accepting a proposal under the State of Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with Southeastern Equipment Company Incorporated in the amount of $187,885 for the purchase of a wheel loader and declaring an emergency. That passed the 6-0 vote. We also had ordinance number 41, 2023, an ordinance authorizing the city of Springdale, Ohio to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement by and between Huntington Public Capital Corporation and the city of Springdale, Ohio, in a principal amount of $190,000 to finance the purchase of a wheel loader for the city of Springdale and authorizing other documents in connection therewith and declaring an emergency, and that passed the 6-0 vote. We had ordinance number 42, 2023, an ordinance declaring certain city property as surplus property and authorizing the sale, disposal, or transfer of said surplus property and declaring an emergency, which passed the 6-0 vote. And we also had ordinance number 43, 2023, an ordinance amending ordinance number 51, 1999, to extend the exemption from taxation for certain parcels in the city pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 5709.51 and declaring an emergency, and that passed with a 6-0 vote.
Okay, and saying Mr. Hawkins, recap of legislative items requested for our next council meeting.
I don't have anything unless there's anything from council with administration.
Administration, we solid? Mr. Yule?
Yes, Mr. President. Just as a reminder, we will have, as mentioned, several code changes coming through. We're going to try and bunch these together. We go into code to change one item. We find 3 more that need to be updated, some related, some unrelated. Nonetheless, while we're in there, we're going to do some cleanup language while we're in each of those code sections as well. We're trying to lump them all together. We're going to obviously prioritize some of those, but you'll start to see those effective next meeting so that they're in place in December.
All right, well, with that, we have item 16 before us.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Council's adjourned.